Angela Marie Samota, who went by Angie, was born on September 19, 1964, in Alameda, California, the youngest of 5 children to Frank and Betty Ruth Samota. Her family later moved to Texas, where Angie grew up. Known for her bright and charismatic personality, she pursued a degree in computer science and electrical engineering at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. Angie was active in campus life, serving as the social chairman for the Zeta Tau Alpha sorority, where she was well-liked and admired. On October 12, 1984, 20-year-old Angie went out for an evening of bar hopping with friends Anita Kadala and Russell Buchanan. Once the night was over, she dropped Russell and Anita off at their homes and then stopped by her boyfriend Ben McCall's place before returning to her own apartment at around 1 a.m. Shortly after returning home, she called Ben in a panic, telling him about a man who she regrettably let in to use the phone and bathroom. Concerned, Ben asked her to call back once he left. However, that call never came. Concerned, he drove to her apartment, but found the door locked and no response from inside. He then called the police, who forced their way in. Inside, officers discovered Angie's body on her bed. She had been sexually assaulted and stabbed multiple times, 18 to be exact. Biological evidence was collected, but at the time, DNA technology was limited to blood type analysis. Investigators ruled out her boyfriend Ben and an ex-boyfriend from her hometown of Abilene named Lance, who had previously threatened her with a knife and cut up her clothing. Suspicion then fell on Russell Buchanan, the man who had been out with her that night. Buchanan lacked an alibi for the time of the murder and left town the following day, raising further suspicion. However, despite attempts to gather incriminating evidence, including a meeting between him and Angie's roommate, Sheila Wasowski, who wore a wire, no conclusive evidence linked him to the crime. Buchanan was later cleared of any involvement and went on to become one of Dallas's most acclaimed architects. Angie's case went cold, but Sheila refused to let her friend's memory fade. Over the next 20 years, she regularly contacted investigators for updates and began teaching women self-defense techniques in her honor. The breakthrough in the case came in 2006 when advancements in DNA technology allowed investigators to re-examine the biological evidence. The DNA from the crime scene ultimately matched Donald Andrew Best Jr., a convicted criminal of sexual assault who was already serving a life sentence in Texas for unrelated crimes. At the time of Angie's murder, Best had been out on parole for a prior sexual assault conviction. In 2008, Best, who was charged with Angie's death, was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. He remained on death row until his death from natural causes on October 8, 2022. Though justice was delayed, Angie's story serves as a testament to perseverance and the importance of never giving up on the pursuit of answers. Jessica Melissa Currin was born to parents Joe and Jean on November 29, 1981, in Mayfield, Kentucky. At 18, she was described as a caring and attentive young woman, deeply committed to her 1-year-old son, Zion. Even though her pregnancy was allegedly the result of a sexual assault by a man named Jeremy Adams, who was a petty criminal and small-time drug dealer, she loved him very much and made him her world. However, in the late summer of 2000, all that would come crashing down. On August 1, 2000, Jessica's charred body was discovered behind Mayfield Middle School by a teacher. She had sadly been sexually assaulted, beaten, strangled, and set on fire. Unfortunately, the investigation into her murder was marred by mishandling from the very beginning. A novice detective, Tim Fortner, was assigned to the case, but he later admitted he was ill-equipped to manage its complexities. This inexperience led to critical mistakes, including improper handling of the crime scene and evidence, delaying justice, and allowing misinformation to cloud the investigation. Fortner interviewed Jessica's friend, Venetia Stubblefield, who she had hung out with on the last night she was seen alive. Venetia said that on July 29, 2000, the two, along with Victoria Caldwell, played cards until the early morning hours, and then Jessica left on foot to walk the 1.5 miles back to her apartment. However, when Fortner interviewed Victoria, she told a different story. She said that after the girls parted ways, Venetia got into a white car with 2 men and directed them to where Jessica was walking home. The two men then drove over there and picked Jessica up. However, an argument quickly broke out between Jessica and the men, and so Venetia, not wanting to be involved, got out of the car. To corroborate some of this information, Fortner interviewed neighbors of Jessica who said that Venetia was aware that Jessica had been strangled with a belt and stabbed with a knife. However, this information had not been released to the public. 9 weeks after the murder, Venetia was arrested and charged with criminal facilitation to commit murder. However, the conviction would never go through because Victoria began receiving death threats advising her not to testify against Venetia. It was so bad that she and her mother had to be placed in a police safe house. Then, just before the trial, Victoria recanted her statement, and she and her family fled to California, and police were never able to track them down. The case against Venetia was then dropped. 6 months after the murder, Fortner went to interview Zion's alleged father, Jeremy Adams, who was now in jail for an unrelated crime. He showed Adams photos from the crime scene, thinking that might lead to a confession, but it didn't. With the photos fresh in his mind, he went back to his cell and described the scene to his cellmate, Jesse Roberts. After hearing all of this, Roberts contacted the jailer, who called Fortner and asked him to come back. Roberts then told Fortner that Adams had confessed to the murder, and he was subsequently charged with murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. Roberts' information alone was enough to get a grand jury to indict Adams. When Adams' trial began a year later, the judge quickly realized that Fortner and the Mayfield police had withheld 18 pieces of evidence from the defense. That evidence showed Fortner suspected 2 men had picked Jessica up. The judge was so mad that he threatened to jail Fortner. Adams wasn't the only person that Fortner went after. 20-year-old Carlos Saxton was also charged with complicity in the murder, but he denied knowing Adams at all. Both men had their charges dismissed due to insufficient evidence and investigative missteps, leaving the case to grow cold. Fortner also interviewed another individual named Quincy Cross. Apparently, on the night of Jessica's murder, Cross, who was from out of town, attended a house party on Chris Drive, where partygoers noted his strange behavior. They said he was constantly talking and repeatedly saying that he wanted to find a woman. Cross, drunk and high on drugs, was in and out of the house all night and was often seen talking on his phone. Then at 5 a.m., he borrowed the homeowner's blue Pontiac, saying he was headed to see one of his girls. Almost 3 hours later, at 7:50 a.m., he was spotted by a deputy sheriff after the car broke down. The officer said he reeked of gasoline, and there was a gas can on the back seat. The owner of the car would later say that he didn't own a gas can and it had not been in the car when Cross borrowed it. Even though Cross provided the officer with fake identifying information, he still allowed him to go. Cross then walked back to the party on Chris Drive. Once back at the party, a man by the name of Austin Leach arrived. He and Cross were seen whispering with each other for a long period of time before Leach left in his white Cadillac. Fortner questioned Leach but received no viable information pertaining to the murder. Years later, the case was revived by amateur investigator Susan Galbraith and British journalist Tom Mangold. Susan was able to track down Doris Victoria Caldwell. Victoria said that on the night of the murder, Jessica and 16-year-old Venetia were at her house playing cards. At some point, Venetia told them that she had made plans to hang out with Cross. Not long after, Cross arrived at Victoria's house, and all 3 girls got in the car with him. He then drove them in the blue Pontiac to the party house on Chris Drive, where he exchanged the car for Leach's white Cadillac. They then drove to another house and picked up Victoria's cousin, 21-year-old Tamara Caldwell, and 20-year-old Jeffrey Burton. Once everyone was in the car, Cross began passing around cocaine. They then began driving to Burton's home. While on the way, Cross and Caldwell began inappropriately touching Jessica, even though she asked them not to. Once at Burton's house, Cross grabbed a baseball bat from the floor of the car and hit Jessica over the head with it, knocking her unconscious. Venetia, Victoria, Tamara, Cross, and Burton then took Jessica inside, where Tamara and the men sexually assaulted her. When they were done, Cross strangled her to death with his belt. Cross then forced Venetia and Victoria to also sexually assault her, so they would be implicated in the crime. Jessica's body was then placed in Burton's garage for 2 days before the smell became too much. So Burton, along with 19-year-old Austin Leach and 14-year-old Isaac Benjamin, took her remains to the school and set them on fire again. Venetia also eventually told a similar account of the evening. In March of 2007, Cross, Burton, and Tamara were indicted on charges of capital murder, kidnapping, first-degree sexual assault, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. As for Venetia and Victoria, they were charged with abuse of a corpse and tampering with evidence and pleaded guilty. Venetia received 7 years in prison, and Victoria received 5 years. Both also agreed to testify against the other 3. On April 8, 2008, Cross was found guilty of murder, kidnapping, and the sexual assault of Jessica and was sentenced to life in prison plus 58 years for the other charges. In September, Burton and Tamara entered an Alford plea to second-degree manslaughter and abuse of a corpse. An Alford plea basically means they didn't have to admit guilt. Burton was given 15 years in prison, while Tamara was sentenced to 10 years. Austin Leach, who owned the white Cadillac that transported the group, and Isaac Benjamin were also indicted for 2 counts of tampering with evidence. After a short trial, Leach was acquitted, but it's unclear what happened to Benjamin. Jessica's tragic case highlights the devastating consequences of a mishandled investigation and the persistence of those determined to seek justice. Her death and the events surrounding it serve as a haunting reminder of the importance of competent investigative work in achieving justice. To this day, Cross maintains his innocence. Jessica's father, Joe, has also said he believes Cross is innocent. Some believe the actual murderers of Jessica are Jeremy Adams and Carlos Saxton. Others believe the story that was told, but say that Burton was the one who killed her and not Cross. Cross's friend, Timothy Carr, said that Cross admitted to having sex with Jessica on the night of the murder. Cross also told Victoria's sister, Rosie Christ, that he was in the room when Jessica was killed. Cross then told the Paducah Sun newspaper after the trial that he had never even met Jessica. He also denied knowing Burton and Tamara, as well as Victoria and Venetia. In 2016, he filed a motion requesting a new trial, saying that Victoria, Venetia, and Rosie Christ all allegedly recanted their testimony and said they lied to get reward money and because they felt threatened by law enforcement. However, the trial court denied his motion. Unfortunately, it is hard to know the exact truth due to law enforcement dropping the ball and so many conflicting stories. What do y'all think? Let me know in the comments below. Kimberly Langwell, who went by Kim, was born on February 24, 1965, in Houston, Texas. At 34, she was living in Beaumont, where she worked at a local chemical plant. Kim was described as a spunky, goofy, kind-hearted, and vibrant individual, with her greatest joy being her daughter, Tiffany. She was a hard-working single mother who often juggled up to 3 jobs to provide for herself and her daughter. Kim had recently ended her relationship with Terry Rose due to his obsessive behavior and then began dating a man named Ken Weatherford. Unfortunately, her breakup with Terry would come back to haunt her. On July 9, 1999, Kim left work at 5 p.m. and stopped at a convenience store about 30 minutes later to call Tiffany and Ken. She let them know she would be home in about an hour so they could enjoy dinner together. But before heading home, she told them she planned to visit her mother and then go by Terry's house to help him hang some boards as part of a home remodeling project. Tragically, after hanging up, she was never heard from again. Later that evening, Ken retraced her route and discovered her gray 1993 Nissan Altima abandoned in the parking lot of the now-defunct Eckerd Pharmacy at the Gateway Shopping Center in Beaumont. Her purse and keys were still inside the car. Suspicion quickly turned toward Terry, especially since she had planned to visit his home that evening. However, no evidence could tie him to her disappearance, and the case eventually went cold. For 25 years, Kim's daughter Tiffany believed her mother was buried on Terry's property, but without a search warrant, the property was never searched. However, all that changed in April 2024 when police received a tip from a reliable informant stating that Kim had been killed at Terry's home and her remains were still on the property. 2 months later, armed with a search warrant and a probable cause affidavit, police searched his home on Lindbergh Drive. 3 days into the search, human remains were discovered, and DNA testing confirmed they belonged to Kim, finally bringing answers to her family after all these years. 67-year-old Terry Rose was then arrested and charged with her murder. As of December 2024, he remains in custody on a $1 million bond, awaiting trial, and is considered innocent until proven guilty. The discovery of her remains has brought some closure, though the pain of her absence endures. Kim was properly laid to rest in October 2024, giving her friends and family the opportunity to say goodbye and honor her memory. Madeline Jane Kingsbury, who went by Maddie, was born on June 1, 1996, and was known for her strength, competence, and devotion as a loving mother. While attending Winona State University, she met Adam Fravel and fell in love. During their college years, Maddie became pregnant with their first child, so they decided to settle in Winona, Minnesota. They later married and had a second child, but their 7-year relationship was marked by turbulence. Adam was described by Maddie's loved ones as emotionally distant, unhelpful, and often unkind. Despite her efforts to make the marriage work, her family urged her to leave him. Over time, the cracks in their relationship deepened. Maddie often called her stepmother, Kathy, to share her frustrations about Adam's lack of involvement with the children. In 2020, a friend witnessed Adam slap her during a video call, and by September 2021, Maddie confided in her family about Adam's obsession with the Gabby Petito case. She revealed that he had grabbed her by the throat during an argument, telling her she might end up like Gabby. Unfortunately, the children witnessed the incident, and although her family begged her to leave and document the abuse, Maddie remained protective of Adam and was hesitant to take action, fearing retaliation. However, by the spring of 2023, Maddie had enough and finally told Adam she was done, news that would ultimately end in a horrible tragedy. On March 31, 2023, Maddie and Adam dropped off their 2 children, ages 2 and 5, at daycare. Sadly, it would be the last time anyone outside of Adam would see her alive. That evening, Maddie's sister, Megan, grew concerned when she didn't respond to calls or texts. She then contacted Adam at his parents' home in Mabel, Minnesota, but he claimed Maddie had stayed home to work in her office after they dropped off the children. That evening, Adam picked up the children from daycare and took them to his parents' house. He later posted on Facebook asking for help in finding Maddie. After she was reported missing, police questioned Adam. He told them he had left the house later that morning and took Maddie's minivan to move boxes to his parents' house. He claimed he realized he had packed the wrong boxes, turned around in Choice Township, and returned home around 11:30 a.m. He said he saw Maddie's car still in the driveway, but claimed she wasn't home and said he assumed she had carpooled to her job at the Mayo Clinic. Adam said he later texted her about dinner and picking up the kids, but never received a response. However, inconsistencies in his story quickly emerged. Surveillance footage showed a minivan resembling Maddie's traveling along Highway 43, but the timestamps did not align with Adam's timeline. Investigators noted a 45-minute gap in the van's movements around Choice Township, where Adam claimed to have turned around. As police investigated further, they uncovered signs of a violent struggle. Maddie's purse, jacket, and credit cards were found inside the home, but surveillance cameras had been ripped out. Plus, Adam had fresh scratches on his face, which he claimed were from a friend's dog. Around this time, investigators discovered that Maddie had been in a romantic relationship with an Army veteran named Spencer Sullivan, whom she had reconnected with on Tinder. Maddie's family and friends told investigators that she had told Adam about Spencer only 6 days before her disappearance. By then, she had decided to leave Adam, secure an apartment, and start a new life with her children. While Maddie was making her plans to start fresh, the news of Spencer sent Adam spiraling out of control. According to her, he had become increasingly threatening, hovering over her while she worked and commenting about the possibility of another man raising his children. At this point, it appeared investigators had their prime suspect, but there was still no sign of Maddie. That is, until investigators received a tip that revealed that Adam had been seen near his parents' property riding in a utility vehicle with a shovel. Cadaver dogs were then brought out and alerted to the scent of human remains in Maddie's minivan and on the shovel. On June 7, 2023, 68 days after Maddie's disappearance, her remains were discovered wrapped in a gray, fitted bed sheet and duct tape in a culvert near a property linked to Adam. Forensic evidence tied the bedsheet to a set found in their shared home. Adam was then arrested and charged with second-degree murder, but by October, the charges were upgraded to first-degree murder. Investigators revealed that Adam was financially dependent on Maddie and distressed over the end of their relationship. They also noted Maddie had a $170,000 death benefit with no designated beneficiary, further hinting at a possible motive. In the end, Adam was convicted of Maddie's murder and is currently awaiting sentencing. He faces life in prison, ensuring justice for Maddie and her grieving family. Makayla Christine Young was born on June 15, 1995, to parents Michael and Christy Young. A vibrant young woman with an outgoing personality, Makayla was known for her kind heart and social nature. At 24, she lived in Spokane, Washington, where she was described as a trusting and caring individual who never wanted anyone to feel unloved. But in early 2020, Makayla's life took a dark turn when she began dating 27-year-old Anthony Fuete. At first glance, Anthony appeared to be a charming and attentive partner. However, beneath his facade was a man with a troubling criminal history, including armed robbery. With a tested IQ of 50 and a reputation for erratic behavior, Anthony struggled to form healthy relationships, a side of him that would soon become apparent. On February 6, 2020, Makayla and Anthony were passengers in a car driven by an acquaintance, Josh Thomas. During a random traffic stop, police arrested Anthony on an outstanding warrant and drug charges. Anthony spent 3 weeks in jail, and upon his release, his behavior took a sinister turn. Consumed by paranoia, Anthony accused Makayla of setting him up during the traffic stop. He then mentioned his gang affiliations and threatened her life. However, despite her growing fear, she continued interacting with him, hoping to diffuse his anger. On February 27, 2020, Anthony convinced her to meet him at a 7-Eleven in downtown Spokane to discuss their issues. Nervous, she brought a friend for support. At the 7-Eleven, Anthony was accompanied by another friend, Lionel White, who carried an axe handle for reasons unknown. Anthony pressured Makayla to leave Spokane and move to Portland with him, but her friend persuaded her to stay the night instead. Later that night, Anthony and Lionel checked into a roadway inn on Houston Avenue. Around 11 p.m., Anthony called Makayla again, begging her to come to his hotel room. Despite her friend's earlier warnings, Makayla agreed. Surveillance footage showed her arriving at the motel, embracing Anthony, and walking into the room hand in hand. Shortly after entering the room, Makayla sensed something was wrong. Feeling uneasy, she posted a Snapchat story asking for a ride, but sadly, no one saw it in time. Around 1 a.m., guests at the motel reported a loud argument coming from Anthony's room. When police arrived, they encountered Lionel leaving the room, but found no one inside upon a quick check. The following day, a housekeeper noticed blood on the door handle of the room and used a master key to enter. Inside, she discovered Makayla's lifeless body. She was found partially nude, lying face down on the bed. She had been brutally stabbed to death. Blood spatter on the walls and door handles suggested Makayla had fought desperately to escape. Anthony was arrested later that day after attempting to carjack multiple vehicles near a car dealership. Covered in blood and behaving erratically, he was taken into custody. Lionel, who had fled the scene, was arrested at another motel. During questioning, Lionel claimed he had left the room to give the couple privacy and denied involvement in Makayla's death. However, the evidence at the scene told a different story. Police found a knife believed to be the murder weapon, along with bloodied towels Lionel had placed outside the room. Anthony Fuete eventually accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to aggravated murder with a deadly weapon. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. A chilling video surfaced of Anthony in jail, reenacting and bragging about Makayla's murder, showing no remorse for his actions. Lionel, on the other hand, pleaded guilty to lesser charges and was released on time served. Despite his presence at the crime scene and suspicious behavior, Lionel faced no further punishment, leaving Makayla's grieving family devastated. Makayla's family continues to honor her memory, ensuring her story is not forgotten.